Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is week 6 in the CFL, and this is Ian Cameron with you. He's flying solo this week, but still back here as always and ready to take apart and break down and analyze another CFL card for week 6. Can't believe it's week 6 already, but of course, 4 more games on tap. We will begin the show as we are going to start doing when we do these CFL shows. We're going to start by talking about the team that's on the bye week for this current week. And unfortunately, that team is my sad sack, pathetic, winless Hamilton Tiger Cats. And another dismal effort from them, especially on the defensive side of the football against the BC Lions on Sunday, losing that one in blowout fashion. Really, they lost that game in the first half. The defense that just could not make any stops, a secondary that is a complete and utter joke right now, if you ask me. They couldn't cover me or my neighbor down the field right now in the passing game with how bad they have been. It's just been some atrocious, ugly football from the Hamilton Ticats defense, and that was probably a new low on Sunday night against BC. They gave up 34 points to the BC Lions before we even hit halftime. 383 passing yards. I believe Justin McInnes, the great receiver of the Lions, had 100 receiving yards or close to it at halftime of that game. It was an absolute disaster of a defensive performance. The offense was up and down. It started slow, but you can't really pin that loss, or you really can't hang a lot of this on Bo Levi Mitchell and the Ticats offense. This is more the defense just being exceptionally bad. And that is how bad they have been. Their secondary has been just horrendous, god fucking awful. The pass rush hasn't been there. I don't think their linebacking core is as good. And the offense has had to play catch up in a lot of these games. So the bye week for this 0-5 Hamilton team, they've somehow got to figure this out. Will they is another story and another question. And it's not going to get any easier for them with the Toronto Argonauts, the team they play following their bye week next Saturday. So we'll see how they fare in that game. But some soul searching needs to be done. I think Mark Washington needs to go. He needs to be gone as the defensive coordinator. Now, look, it's not all his fault, but he's the DC. The buck stops with him, and you can't, release every player on the defensive side of the football. At some point, you need to make a change. You need to make a shakeup. And I'm surprised that they haven't announced it yet, that he's been let go. Maybe they're going to wait a little bit longer. They are on a bye week. Maybe next week we're going to hear that they've made a change, or maybe they're not going to make a change. But regardless, this Hamilton defense has been the worst part of this team. Yeah, they've had other issues. The offense has been inconsistent, but we have also seen the offense play well at times and play well enough to win games, and the defense has let them down, like it did in the Saskatchewan game at home where they blew the lead in the fourth quarter, like it did against Saskatchewan on the road where the defense couldn't get a stop, like they did against Ottawa when they had a lead in the fourth quarter, and both of Ottawa's last 2 drives resulted in points that won the game for the Red Blacks. So the defense is the biggest fault for Hamilton, and that's what's going to have to get cleaned up for them going into the bye week. All right, let's get to week 6 and the 4 games, and we'll begin with Thursday night, where it is going to be for the second time in 3 weeks. The Toronto Argonauts taking on the Montreal Alouettes, the 2 best teams in the East. They played each other in Toronto a couple weeks ago, Montreal getting the win and cover in that game. Now the rematch here in Montreal Thursday night. Owls laying 6.5, 50.5 the total in this game. Argos, after a 2-0 start to the year with home wins against Edmonton and BC. They've now dropped back-to-back games against Montreal. The aforementioned loss to the Alouettes 2 weeks ago, 30-20 for their first loss of the season. Really, they were outplayed pretty well in that game, especially the offense for the Alouettes, did a lot of damage. And, it was probably one of the weaker performances from Cameron Dukes for the Argos, leading that offense when he was playing exceptionally well in the first 2 games. But then he faced Montreal, and you saw him struggle in that game. And if you thought that was a tough game for Cameron Dukes, it was even worse last week against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. That was a horrendous game from Cameron Dukes. But you got to, I think, really tip your cap to Corey Mace, the head coach of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, someone who knew Cameron Dukes very well from his time as the DC there. You can tell they schemed and they devised a game plan to really confuse um, Cameron Dukes, really put him in a spot where he was kind of forcing things, and they disguised coverages, they disguised blitzes throughout that football game. It was just a defensive gem by Corey May. I think he had his defense well prepared, and not to mention Saskatchewan's defense is getting better week to week. But at the same point in time, it was still just a awful night, rough night at the office for Cameron Dukes, only completing 19 of 33 passes, 206 yards, 4 interceptions against that Saskatchewan team last week in the 30-23 loss to the Riders. So back-to-back road games now for the Argos, 2 straight losses for them, looking to bounce back. It is a revenge spot for Toronto. It's actually now they've lost to Montreal each of the last 2 times. They lost in the East Final last year to Montreal. That's when they made Chad Kelly look terrible. The defense completely shut down Chad Kelly and made him look silly, honestly, in that game. And they pretty much made Cam Dukes look that way a couple weeks ago. Can they bounce back? That's the question. I cashed a ticket against Montreal last week. They're 4-0. They found 5-0, I should say, straight up, 3-2 against the spread. They found a way to win against Calgary last week, but I was hoping we wouldn't get their A game. I was hoping we would see maybe this Montreal team maybe play down to their competition a little bit, a team that, played Ottawa, their home opener, with getting the Grey Cup rings and the Grey Cup banner being put up at Percival Molson Stadium. Then they played Toronto, the team they're battling with. It's really already pretty much come down to almost a 2-team. I shouldn't say that. Ottawa's still in the mix right now in the East, but you would think Toronto and Montreal are the teams that have the best chance to win the East, although it's Montreal's division to lose with this 5-0 start right now. I just had that sixth sense that we weren't getting Montreal's best game last week. Didn't help either that Marc-Antoine Dequoy got injured against Calgary last week and didn't return to the game, and he's a game-time decision, and that is a big-time deal, whether he plays or not for the Alouettes. He is a difference maker, make no mistake about it, in the secondary for the Alouettes. We'll see if he's able to give it a go here in this game. If he doesn't, that could open up some things in the passing game for Cameron Dukes, as long as he does a better job taking care of the football. That being said, one of the biggest ball hawks in this secondary on Montreal being out, if Dequoy doesn't play, certainly would help and aid the cause of Cameron Dukes being able to maybe have a little bit better ball security, because one thing is for sure, he needs it, after the way he has all of a sudden become a turnover machine here in the last 2 games, after the first 2 games just being so strong for him in the victories over the Elks and the Lions. So which Cameron Dukes is it going to be? I mean, in the first 2 weeks, he was awesome. The last 2 weeks, he's come back down to earth here. At this number, I kind of lean to the Argos, believe it or not. I know they're off 2 straight losses. I still, part of the reason I took Calgary last week plus 10.5, it got bet all the way down to 7.5 by kickoff. But part of the reason I took them was I think Montreal's at the point now with just this blazing start to the season that already a little overvalued potentially from a point spread standpoint. Even with that 5-0 perfect record, the defending Grey Cup champion Alouettes are only 3-2 against the spread. And, we saw them at Edmonton. They didn't cover as 4-point favorites. And, of course, last week they have to come from behind to win by 4, wire-to-wire point spread cover for Calgary in that game against Montreal. It just feels like in this spot, Toronto losing a couple weeks ago off back-to-back losses, they'll give it their best go. But will it be enough is going to be the question here. And maybe there's also that little onus on Montreal that, hey, we kind of got away with maybe not playing our best performance last week against Calgary. We're going to have to play better for 4 quarters than we did last week against the Stampeders. But at this number, I still lean Toronto. I like over the total here as well. This Toronto Argonauts team, for the most part, continues to be an over machine. If you look at the way they've played so far, 3-1 to the over in their 4 games, and the only game that stayed under was by the hook, a 0.5 point, with the total being 50.5 when these 2 teams played a couple of weeks ago in Toronto. This total is in that 50.5 range. There is a 50 at Bet Online, so if you have access to that book, I would bet that there. I just think this Toronto secondary continues to be vulnerable. You can make big plays in the passing game. I think the Cody Fajardo props are probably worth a look. He has a tremendous league best completion rate. I think his passing prop is just shy of 300 yards. So you can probably hit 300 yards here going against this Toronto secondary, which hasn't been great. Maybe you look to Philpott props, Julian Grant props as well. Some of these great receivers for the Alouettes who have been terrific. I think they'll move the ball on Toronto. They've had no problem, obviously, offensively, this Montreal team. They really haven't. I mean, 27 against Winnipeg. The Edmonton game was weird. It's kind of weird that their lowest output this year was against that miserable Edmonton defense. But last 3 weeks, they've scored 47, 30, and 30. You can pretty much pencil in Montreal probably to get to 28, 30, 31 points, maybe even 35 at home against this Toronto team. You'd only need, 21 points or so from Toronto, rather, to get over the total. And we did see Montreal's defense, when Dequoy left that game last week, we did see their defense struggle a bit, in that game. Mayer was able to make some more plays. They got the run game going. That was very impressive as well. So we'll see how it goes. It is worth noting, though, as well, in that game for Calgary, they got some good field position from a couple of turnovers. They also got, when you look at it, a big kick return that set them up in good field position. So it wasn't necessarily the dreadful defensive effort from Montreal that maybe it looks like, because they gave up 26 points. But I still think we may see this game just creep over the total here with the Argos and the Owls. And I'll probably put a little +7 in pocket. I don't feel great about it because, I worry Montreal, especially a divisional game. They want to play better, and they know they didn't play their best and kind of got away with one last week against Calgary. But I like the intangibles here for Toronto. You've lost 2 in a row. Focus will be there. They lost to Montreal just 2 weeks ago. You're getting a good number with them, +7. Their defense obviously is the big concern for this Argos team. Not what it was last year, but at this number, I would still lean to taking the Argos here and the Boatmen in a revenge spot, +6.5, +7 in this game. All right, Friday night football tonight. We've got the Calgary Stampeders and Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg 5-point home favorites, 47.5 the total in this game. I wish I could tell you go bet Winnipeg because I like that side, but problem is it looks like everyone else likes that side. This opened as low as 2.5, and look, the news that Zach Collaros is practicing again and likely to start and return as the number 1 quarterback this week is probably part of the reason the number's gone up. But now that it's up to 5, pump the brakes just a little bit. Let's not forget Zach Collaros wasn't all that great, before his injury, which happened against this Calgary team a couple weeks ago. But there's a lot of things that point to Winnipeg. Initially, when they were laying only 2.5, 3, the fact they finally got their first win against Ottawa last week, 25-16. The defense played their best game of the season. And look, that is a defense that it is young, it is inexperienced, especially in the secondary. They have to adjust to Jackson Jeffcoat's retirement, but they needed Willie Jefferson to step up. He did. I think that was easily Willie Jefferson's best game of the season for Winnipeg. They need his pass rush. They need his ability to crash the pocket. And he was able to do that last week. Looked like vintage Willie Jefferson with his performance last week in the victory over the Red Blacks. Drew Brown, of course. Let's also keep in mind, too, Drew Brown leaving that game due to injury for the Ottawa Red Blacks. It certainly helped the cause for Winnipeg a little bit, even though Dustin Crum, who entered that game for Ottawa, was a very, I guess you could say, pretty experienced quarterback now. He got so many starts last year for Ottawa, but still, it was an advantage for Winnipeg. They did play a much better game. There's no question. If you look at the yardage numbers, they outgained Ottawa in that football game. Lots to like. The defense was better. There's no question about that. The one concern I would have is that they did allow 103 rushing yards to Reichwell Armstead running the football for Ottawa. So, the run game was gashed a little bit. Can Calgary maybe take advantage of that? You would think maybe they can, but, their run game has been a little bit underwhelming here the last few weeks. We'll see if they can pick it up here against Winnipeg. I think when you look at it, and the key to Calgary last week, they did so many good things. They had an excellent first half against Montreal, but Montreal made their run, as you knew they would, when they were trailing to the Stamps. And when that game was on the line, when there was a game to be won, and that's a big reason, too, why I kind of liked Winnipeg at the early in the week. Jake Mayer doesn't make the clutch plays. He just doesn't. He did not do anything offensively to put Calgary in a position to win that game. In the fourth quarter, he was pretty much shut down, and that's always been the issue I've had with Jake Mayer. I'm not sure he's a big game quarterback. I'm not sure he's a big time. I need a drive to win a football game. 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Jake Mayer's going to fucking deliver it for me. I don't believe he can. I still don't buy that he can do that for me consistently. So there's still questions with him. He did some good things, but again, some wayward throws, some inaccuracy, the interception to seal the game at the end. The bottom line is he didn't get it done. And it's a get it done business in sports and a get it done league. And that's the way it goes. And Jake Mayer didn't do that last week with the game on the line against Montreal. So hard time trusting him on the road. And plus, you have the revenge factor, too. Winnipeg losing a couple weeks ago to this Calgary team. Heartbreaking in overtime. That was the game where Collaros got injured. Chris Strevler came in, and Chris Strevler really struggled. He did put that drive together to tie the game, to get it to overtime in Calgary a couple weeks ago. But overall, it was not a clean, crisp performance from the Stamps or from the Bombers in that overtime loss to the Stampeders. They'll look for redemption here. I think they can get it. A little concerned that the number's gotten away a little too much right now, but I would still, with where this number is right now, I'd still lean Winnipeg. I mean, there's not going to be a point where I'm going to want to come back to Calgary until it gets up to at least 6, if not 7. I still think Winnipeg can win by 6, 7 plus in this game. I think kind of like last week, they beat Ottawa by 9. I think they can beat Calgary by like 6, 7. I think if it hits 7, I'd be a little concerned with taking Winnipeg at that number, but I do think they win this football game. They finally have a little positive momentum now following the big win against Ottawa last week to get them off the schneid, get them that first win of the season. I think they can carry that over here in this game. And another thing that concerns me too is you look at this Calgary run defense, league worst in terms of yards per carry allowed. Worst team in the CFL yards per carry allowance with the run defense for Calgary. That could be trouble against Brady Oliveira, who, by the way, is coming off maybe his best game last week in the victory against the Ottawa Red Blacks. So that run defense, really it's a domino effect with the Winnipeg offense. If they're able to run the football, it opens things up for Zach Collaros, and it opens things up for their receivers down the field. Even though they are a team that's down Lawler and Schoen, 2 of their best receivers, they've still got Dembski, they've still got Wolotarski. A couple of these other young receivers have stepped up, especially last week for them. And that would be the gravest concern I have for Calgary, is that the run defense has kind of been chewed up so far. And now they've got Brady Oliveira coming off a game where he rushed for 129 yards, looked like the vintage Brady Oliveira, who looked like the best running back in the CFL last year. So, Winnipeg's taking money, and for good reason, in my opinion. Totals wise, I've not much on the total. I could really go either way. I kind of lean under. Winnipeg's going to look to control the clock. Calgary's not an offense that's explosive. A lot of their points against Montreal were short fields and special teams and penalties by Montreal. It's not like Jake Mayer drove the team methodically down the field last week against Montreal. He had only barely over 100 passing yards for the game. So I think the under is probably where I would lean with the total in this one. All right. Next up here, as we continue along, we've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the BC Lions. This game is on Saturday night. BC 7-point home favorites, 51.5, 52 the total. You know what I'm betting here. You guys already know it. I mean, what more do we need to say? Talked about this trend all season. 14-1 now to the over for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in their last 15 games. And I get it. Last week, lucky as fuck, fortuitous as shit to cash that over in the Toronto-Saskatchewan game. I totally get it. Defensive points, of course, including the pick 6 that was thrown by Cameron Dukes in the fourth quarter. Interception return for a touchdown. Another interception that put Saskatchewan in great field position. I get it. The offense wasn't necessarily the reason for Saskatchewan putting up 30 points last week, because Shea Patterson only had 192 passing yards. A.J. Ouellette really never got it going running the football. It was more defensive, setting up Saskatchewan with short fields, getting the defensive score in the fourth quarter, the Marcus Sales pick 6 on Cameron Dukes. So I got a little good fortune in that game going over the total, but that's the way it is with Saskatchewan games, whether it's their offense scoring, their defense scoring, special teams scores, whatever the case. And that's another thing, too, about that over last week. There was that early kick return touchdown by Janarian Grant right at the start of the game for Toronto. So we had some defensive scores, special teams scores. I get it. The offensive production and output does not equate to 53 points last week in that Argos Riders game. I get it. So I'm a little lucky to get that over, but I'm riding it at this point blindly until it stops cashing for me. I mean, we're talking 14-1 to the over in the last 15 games for these Saskatchewan games. And I actually expect Shea Patterson to build on last week. It wasn't a great game for him. He had his struggles. You can tell he's, even with the bye week and the practice, it was still his first start, not comfortable yet in the offense, but he gets the game under his belt. I thought he got better as the game went on. I thought he was much better in the second half than he was in the first half last week against Toronto. We'll see how he fares now here. Now he's got to do it on the road, tough environment. BC Place Stadium can get loud sometimes. So how will he handle it? But I think the fact now he's got a start under his belt. The O-line is significantly improved this year for Saskatchewan. You would think Shea Patterson's got the opportunity to build on the performance he had last week against Toronto. Plus, BC's defense continues to be very spotty. That's the word for it. They're not terrible, but they're spotty. They gave up 24 to Winnipeg, 35 in the opener to Toronto, 21 to Edmonton, and they barely survived that one. 28 points to Hamilton. Now, we saw a lot of garbage points in that game for Hamilton late. But still, BC's defense is not a shutdown group by any stretch of the imagination. So, Saskatchewan should have the opportunity to put some points on the board. Saskatchewan's defense is really starting to improve. And eventually they're going to have one of those games where, like last week, they play so well that finally we get a game staying under the total. And the last two games, they only gave up 20 to Hamilton, 23 to Toronto. So they are playing better. Like Corey Mason, I said it right in our season preview show and earlier on in the season that this defense was horrible for Saskatchewan last year. But as the season goes, they will likely get better because of who their coach is. Corey Mace just knows defense, and he's a mastermind on that side of the football. And we have seen already just great growth and improvement in this rider stop unit here early in the season. But the fact remains, even with the last two better defensive efforts, Saskatchewan did score in the 30s in both games against the Argos and the Ticats, 4-0 to the over this year. Part of that 14-1 over streak for the Rough Riders in their last 15 games dating back to last year. So if it ain't broke, I'm still going over the total here in this game with Saskatchewan, BC. Not to mention last year, if you look at the first meeting between the two teams, it was 19-9 in favor of BC in the first meeting, but Mason Fine was at quarterback for Saskatchewan, and Vernon Adams got injured very early in that game and left and never came back, and Dane Evans had to take over at quarterback, the now retired Dane Evans. So that 19-9 score is a little bit misleading. The other two head-to-head matchups, BC and Saskatchewan last year, Vernon Adams played in both of them, and both of them flew over the total. And I can't say enough about how good Vernon Adams, and one of those games that went over the total, by the way, actually the two games that went over the total, it was Jake Dolegala at quarterback. It was a backup quarterback for Saskatchewan, just like we're going to see here Saturday night with Shea Patterson. So, Vernon Adams and BC against Saskatchewan with a backup in both of those games, Jake Dolegala, and those two games still went over the total last year head-to-head. 34-29, 33-26 were the final scores. So definitely the play for me here is over 51.5 in this Rough Riders-Lions game. As far as the side, look, 6.5 is where it opened, up to 7, 7.5 starting to pop up. I know BC is incredibly lethal offensively when they're on their game, although I think Hamilton's defense made them look even better last week. The fact remains, big play VA, was awesome last week. He's carved up Saskatchewan both times he played them last year. Now, again, this is Corey Mace's defense now, and they're getting better, but it's a lot to ask for Saskatchewan on the road to be able to cover all these great BC receivers. And they haven't even been able to run the football all that well this year with William Stanback. They've really been a one-dimensional offense, but their passing game is so good. It's almost like they can still survive and win games and have a good offense even without the run game working with William Stanback. So going to be interesting to see how they fare here in this matchup against the Riders. One thing I do want to point out with BC being such a pass, so much of their offensive production is coming through the air with the passing game. It's always important to look at just how the opposing team is doing as far as their secondary is concerned. And when you look at the results here for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, as far as their pass defense on the season to this point, they are ranked right now ninth in the CFL as far as passing yards allowed. So as much as Corey Mason, the defense has been great against the run, pretty good in total yards too. It's just a lot of the damage has been, in the secondary. And keep in mind too, Roland Milligan, we like, their secondary play is getting better. You saw Marcus Sales with the pick six, getting him as well was big to help this secondary. But you're talking about one hell of a passing attack right now that BC has. So on the road as well for the Riders in this game. So I think BC can still get to their 28.31 point allotment. I think Saskatchewan can do some damage here as well. So still like over 51.5. I'm actually seeing 7.5 at DraftKings and Bet Online. I might take a little Saskatchewan at plus 7.5. I mean, we're talking about a 4-0 football team straight up in ATS. Everything this has been the best read I've had all season on a team. It's Saskatchewan. I said all in our preview show early in the season. I thought this team could be much improved. I love their over 7.5 win total. I took a flyer on them to win the West and the Grey Cup, and here they are 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread, including a game without Trevor Harris. They've been undervalued all season, and as far as I'm concerned, they're probably undervalued again here, especially with Shea Patterson at quarterback. You're getting a little bonus in the point spread because they've dropped Saskatchewan without Trevor Harris. But you look at this team, and I don't know if they should be this big of an underdog. I get it because Trevor Harris ain't there, but this team has got confidence. They've got a great morale, great team spirit. You see the camaraderie in the locker room after these wins and the great post-game speeches from Corey Mace. They're off a bye week as well. Actually, no, they're not off a bye. They were off a bye week going into the Toronto game, but they've got the it's almost like a mini bye week because they played Thursday at home against Toronto, and now they play on a Saturday. Whereas, look, BC plays Sunday in Hamilton. They've got to fly all the way back home to BC to the West Coast and then play on a Saturday. So it's a short week for BC, and Corey Mason, this great coaching acumen, has Thursday last week to Saturday this week to prepare for this game. So I think that matters. And so to me, the idea of taking plus 7.5 with Saskatchewan, I don't mind taking that here. And I know BC can be a tough place to play, and they've historically been very good ATS at home. But you look at the home results for BC, they didn't cover against Edmonton. They barely covered against Calgary. They won by 9, and they needed a Sean White field goal right at the end to cover that point spread. And then the Edmonton game, they never sniffed a point spread cover. They were laying a pretty healthy number, and they only won against the winless Elks by 3, needed a late field goal. So like I said, I think 7.5 is just a little too tall with this number, with BC laying at home here against Saskatchewan in this game. All right, we wrap it up. The final game of CFL Week 6, Ottawa, Edmonton, the winless Edmonton Elks, who will finally be looking to get off the schneid. It is now just them and Hamilton as the only winless teams in the CFL. We've got Edmonton off their bye week going into this game. 0-4 straight up, but 3-1 against the spread. How about that? Edmonton 0-4 straight up, but they're actually 3-1 against the spread so far. So they've been covering numbers, even though they have yet to win a game so far this season. Current number has Edmonton 3.5 point home favorites, 49 being the total in this game. Obviously, the big question mark looming over this football game is the status of Drew Brown, who left the game against Winnipeg last week to injury. Dustin Crum has to take over. 8 for 11, 102 yards. Those numbers aren't bad, but no touchdowns and the one interception, which really hurt. Obviously, this is going to be Dustin Crum's game to start if Drew Brown is a no-go here on Sunday night against Edmonton. You'd like to think a winless team off a bye week is usually, I know in the NFL, it's usually a bet on spot for me. I like to take these teams that have been struggling going into the bye week, bet on them coming out of the bye week. But you got to lay not just 3. You got to lay 3.5 with a winless team that just fucking every single week, whether it's defense, not getting it done, whether it's stupid penalties at the wrong time, whether it's just an interception by McLeod Bethel Thompson at the wrong time, you name it. This Edmonton team has mastered the art of finding ways to lose. They really have. And it's not the easiest thing to say, yeah, let's lay 3.5 points. with this Edmonton Elks team, with just their incredible, ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But if there's ever a week maybe to look in that direction with Edmonton, it could be this week. I did take Edmonton in this game, but I did something that I don't always do, but I felt this was a better thing, a better way to do it, better route to take, safer route to take earlier in the week, and that was taking. Let me just see here. Okay, let me just see. I'm just taking a look here at my bets that I've placed here. Minus 165 is the price here with the Edmonton Oilers. Not Edmonton Oilers, Edmonton Elks. Sorry, getting my sports mixed up. You can tell I miss hockey saying that. Edmonton Elks minus 165 at Circa on the money line. I bet that back on Monday. And the money line price has jumped since then. I don't love laying prices like that usually, but it smells like an Edmonton win by a field goal. I think they are going to get their first win. I do. I know they've had a tough time. Commonwealth Stadium's not any sort of home field edge for this team. It's an apathetic fan base with the struggles of this Elks team. So I think when you look at, home field advantage, there won't be much. And Ottawa certainly is capable of going in here and winning. They're off that 25-16 loss to the Blue Bombers, but 2 straight road games for the Red Blacks. And the wins that they had, they beat Winnipeg, but that was at home. Hamilton at home. Again, they have the 9-point loss at Winnipeg, blown out at Montreal. They're 2 road games, 0-2 straight up, 0-2 against the spread. Now playing a second straight road game here in this one against the Edmonton Elks. Like I say, you can't get a better situational setup. It's a winless team. You expect the desperation and the sense of urgency to be there. You've got the extra time to prepare. You may not see the best quarterback or the number 1 quarterback here for Ottawa if Drew Brown's ruled out. I mean, it's set up on a silver platter for Edmonton to finally step up, get win number 1. But we know what bad teams often can do. They can find ways to screw up good situations. And Edmonton's one of those teams. They could very well do that. We know there's not a good defense. We know there's a defense that's really held them back. That's what's going to have to improve here going. And you would think, after all these years, Chris Jones, that's his side of the football, that they're going to figure it out over the bye week, how to, get this defense into finally playing some better football. But, I'm still waiting on this Edmonton team to be a good defense under Chris Jones. And that's supposed to be his MO. That's supposed to be his bread and butter as a DC all these years in the league. And yet this team just really has not improved very much on the defensive side of the football. So, like I said, I went with the Edmonton Elks money line minus 165 early in the week. 3.5, though, I'd be very careful now with it, but I don't think I can back Ottawa even at plus 3.5 in this game. Like I said, the 2 road games weren't the greatest. Their offense stalled. Their offense bogged down against Winnipeg and Montreal. They got into turnover issues against the Alouettes. They really didn't get much going offensively last week in Winnipeg. Now, I know this is a vulnerable Edmonton defense that hasn't been great, but like I said, I think for Edmonton, I do think they can win this football game. I took the money line. I was willing to pay up a little bit to get the money line as opposed to laying 3 or 3.5 here with the Elks. So that's the road I took. Totals wise, we'll have to see, but certainly Edmonton is one of those teams where unders are not really something I'm overly rushing to bet. But maybe this week it could stay under. Like the total's 49.5. Ottawa with Dustin Crum, he's very athletic. He can run with the football, but throwing the ball can be hit or miss sometimes for him. It's going to be interesting to see how Edmonton game plans for him if it is Dustin Crum behind center here for this one. The one thing that would concern me here for Edmonton is the run defense is the weaker part of this. The defense overall is not very good so far, but they're 8th in total yards allowed, 7th in points allowed, 3rd in passing yards. So they're not that bad in the secondary, but the rush defense, the stopping the run's been a problem again for this team, like it's been the last few years, allowing 108.5 rushing yards per game, 8th in the CFL. And Dustin Crum can run the football. And Reichwell Armstead out of Temple can run the football. So, if the Ottawa run game works, it opens up the passing game then, and maybe Edmonton gets into more trouble. And, Edmonton, their offense, I can't really say many bad things about Bethel Thompson. He's had a couple of ill-timed turnovers and interceptions, 2 last week against BC, but he's also moved the football well. They got to try to get Kevin Brown in the run game going, but they do have weapons at receiver with Dylan Mitchell and with Arkell Smith, Curly Gittens Jr., his old teammate from Toronto who they got in the offseason. Of course, Geno Lewis. There's still weapons here for this Edmonton team. So as far as the total goes here with Edmonton, Ottawa, nothing yet. I haven't moved on it. Let's see who the quarterback is. Could be one of those deals, believe it or not, where if Drew Brown's the quarterback, might be better for the under because Edmonton's a little bit more adept against the pass defensively than they are against the run. But if it's Dustin Crum at quarterback, who, as we've seen many times when he started, is not scared to run the football, not shy of running up the number of pass attempts in the game when he's under center, that could be good for Ottawa's offense against the weaker link of the Edmonton defense, which is their run defense. So maybe with Crum in, it's more of an over game. So that's probably the way I'd approach it. Like I said, early in the week, I jumped on an early week Edmonton money line at a better price than what is out there as of right now. There you go. That is the CFL Week 6 card right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Shout out to everyone in the chat. And everyone tuning into this show, hit the like button. Appreciate it very much. All of a sudden, 3-0 start to the season with best bets. 2 losses in a row. I should have went with the over with BC Hamilton because I bet them both for the equal amount last week. BC Hamilton, that game, I had the Ticats in the over. I bet them for the same amount, but I went with the Ticats. Unfortunately, I had faith in that defense, and they let me down as the best bet on this show last week. So we'll try to turn things around. And look, I'm not. We need a win. We need to bounce back here from the last 2 shows with the best bet. Still 3-2 on the season. I'm going to go to the obvious choice, and that is 14-1 to the over for Saskatchewan games. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the choice for me with the best bet for Week 6 here in the CFL on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Best number out there is 51.5. We're talking about a Saskatchewan team that, again, 14 of their last 15 games have gone over the total. BC against Saskatchewan last year, the last 2 meetings, both of those were the games that Vernon Adams played. They flew over the total with the Riders and the Lions. I think we're going to see more points between these 2 teams once again on Saturday night at BC Play Stadium. So let's go with Saskatchewan, BC, over 51.5. That will be my best bet for Week 6 in the CFL right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Shout out to everyone in the chat. I shouldn't say the chat. These shows are pre-recorded. There is no chat. Get your head on straight, Ian. Shout out to everyone tuning in, watching this show. Whenever you may be doing that, hit the like button. Thank you very much. Reminder, Bet with Bobano is now Monday to Friday. And a reminder, too, get on board at Dub Club. 6 months all sports discount right now available. $400 down to $250 for all sports through January, including the entire NFL and college football season. Great results last year in NFL and college football. Sign up for that. 6 months all sports discount at Dub Club, down to $250 US. Looking forward to another great NFL and college football season. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy the games and good luck this week, and we'll talk to you again next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.